everyone, and welcome to this morning's Sunrise Project call on this beautiful Sunday morning. I'm happy you're here as it is our place to find a moment of solace and peace as we support each other and learn from each other with compassion and love and a desire to heal ourselves and our families. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I am so excited this morning to have with us Dee Sapp. She is our executive director of the SonRise Project, and she is an incredible mom and passionate advocate for inclusivity and accessibility. Her advocacy has led to groundbreaking changes in the state of Maryland's motor vehicle administration testing procedures, ensuring reasonable accommodation under the ADA. Thanks to Dee's incredible persistence, her son Lawrence passed the revised test, scoring a perfect 25 out of 25. She'll share more about that later. She has an incredible educational background in human development and family studies from Penn State, which has laid a solid foundation for her commitment to understanding human development across all stages of life. In October 2020, Dee became a published author, contributing her chapter, Inclusion Matters, to the co-authored compilation, The Nonprofit Legacy, reflecting her passion for inclusion and dedication to the nonprofit sector. Her leadership extends beyond writing. As vice chair for the Charles County Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee, which is called CCAC, and a devoted board member of Down Syndrome Sports of America, Dee actively advocates for the rights of individuals with special needs and contributes to a more inclusive world of sports. Driven by her mission to promote inclusion and remove barriers, she founded the Accessibility Bridge Corporation, which is a nonprofit organization as well. And she empowers people with disabilities by connecting them with vital resources and communities. I could go on and on and on. She is incredible. She was appointed by the governor of Maryland to a 4-year term on the Maryland Development Disabilities Council, and she has been elected to chair the term and continue for another 5 years under Governor Wes Moore. And she also has worked on a new Easter Seals campaign, and I could go on and on and on. But please, let's welcome Dee Sapp this morning to our SonRise Project call. And we're talking about autism today. This is the last Sunday of Autism Awareness Month, and we thought it would be appropriate to have a conversation specifically focused on autism. And Dee, you are such an advocate in this space and have such personal experience in this space. So thank you for being willing to share your story and to educate our village about this. And I want to remind people, if you want to share your story, feel free to come off of mute. Feel free to come on camera if you feel comfortable, completely up to you. But Dee, I'm going to turn it over to you with the real simple first question, which is, what is autism? What is autism? What is it all about? What's the
Hi,
definition?
good morning.
Good
Thank
morning.
you. So, the official definition, autism or ASD, as we usually say, is a broad range of conditions characterized by challenges with social skills, repetitive behaviors, speech, and nonverbal communication. And according to the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, autism affects an estimated 1 in 36 children and 1 in 45 adults in the United States. So my connection to this space is I have 3 children. My middle son is 22, and he was diagnosed at 17 with autism, but diagnosed at, gosh, I want to say he was 2 years old with developmental delay, which then was later diagnosed as an intellectual disability. He
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask you how was he diagnosed? Was there like some sort of testing, or did you notice something different or special? What prompted the diagnosis at 2?
So he wasn't diagnosed with autism until he was 17.
Oh, I see.
When he was 2, as I mentioned at the time, I had one other child, and Lawrence was nonverbal. He wasn't speaking, he wasn't hitting those marks. And that book that came out, gosh, I can't remember the name of the book, but I think there was What to Expect When You're Expecting, and then there was another book in that series. And um I was always one to check off the boxes to make sure that they were hitting their milestones, making sure that I wasn't feeding them foods early like peanuts and eggs and those things. And even with me doing that, he just wasn't, I think, the talking, because he was actually potty trained earlier than my daughter was. Like, he was hitting some milestones earlier, but then others he wasn't. And his pediatrician kept telling me that boys develop later than girls. And so I let a lot, I feel like, slide. But at some point I reached out to the infants and toddlers program and had them come to our home and do an evaluation on him. And he may have been like 18 months at that time. And they did say that he had a developmental delay. And me being the type of person that needs like a second and third professional opinion, I took him to Kennedy Krieger in Baltimore, and they then confirmed again that he had a
Mhm,
developmental delay,
mhm.
and gave me some tools. I could, for a while, we went back and forth to Kennedy Krieger, but that's like an hour away from where we live in Southern Maryland. And they mentioned that he could get some of the supports in school, because at the time we lived in Prince George's County. And they said that the schools had programs for students like him, and we wouldn't have to drive back and forth. And so that's sort of where the journey began with
Got
the
it.
intellectual. Well, it wasn't intellectual disability, it was just developmental delay at that point. With the autism, which I'll talk about later, that diagnosis came late.
Right.
And I'm not going to say it was a fluke. Every 3 years we had an educational evaluation done for him privately. We didn't let the school do it. And his private therapist that did the evaluation told us then that he also had autism. So that diagnosed, he basically went his whole life without being diagnosed. And that late diagnosis, I think, was very damaging, because he didn't receive the supports that he needed, that would have benefited him before, like almost a year before turning into an adult.
Mm. But when he was a from the developmental disability, was he able to get, and you said support in school, was he able to get support? Like
He
504
was, but the
or how did
support you need for autism isn't the same support that you would need for the developmental disability or the intellectual disability. When he just had the learning disability or developmental disability diagnosis, he was getting support for through like occupational therapy, things like holding a pen correctly. He has expressive and receptive communication. So he was learning how to speak. He was learning how to sound out words, and then academically supports in the classroom, modified assignments, those things. But autism, because it is basically a disability that affects your social skills and how you interact with other people, he wasn't getting the supports in dealing with that. It was more functional and academic.
got it. So when he finally, because it is finally, when he got diagnosed properly, then for that last year in high school, was he able to get the support he needs, or because I guess I know that you are such a huge advocate for him, and so there have been so I want to hear more about your journey with Lawrence and some of the things that you've had to do to really push for changes in our system. So did things change in school at least initially or
They
no?
didn't change at all, because what happened at that point, we had, and for those that are familiar with the special education system, we had an IEP meeting yearly. Well, it was scheduled yearly, but we had them quite frequently because of how engaged I was with his school and trying to get these supports for him. He was basically misdiagnosed within the school system. They should have picked it up, but they did not. And the
Mm,
supports that they were putting in place for him, um, weren't really consistent with the autism. And I would have had to go back with them, but go back to them and say, I need you to retest him to include autism. But he was in the 11th grade at that point, and there were so many challenges with the school system that I actually removed him from the school system and homeschooled him for that last year and a half. Simply because, as you know, Kelly, his dream was to be an Olympic swimmer. He wanted to go to Tokyo, and
Mhm.
the IEP team said that that wasn't a goal, that wasn't a job. And we should have been talking about transition planning and moving him to do the things that he wanted to do for himself. And those things weren't happening.
Got it.
So, and they wanted to remove him from the high school diploma to a special education diploma. So at that point, I felt there's no need to ask them for anything additional because we're not even having the same conversation.
I see.
So he got zero supports in school for the autism.
Wow. So what is important for the people that are on and listening today? What is there's so many things that are important, but what would you say is important to know about autism um and then also want to hear more about Lawrence and his journey.
So what because I was late to the game, and this is actually where my advocacy really started.
Hmm.
I advocated for Lawrence just as a mom, kind of stabbing in the dark, trying to figure things out. But when the autism diagnosis came, like everything shifted. Completely everything shifted because I was racing the clock with him becoming an adult because once they turn 18, all services stop. Like it's a whole new transition space. And I really had to look at his disabilities. I mean, it's a comorbidities because all people with autism don't have uh they don't all have intellectual disabilities. They don't all have these other but he was all of them. He wasn't just one, he was all. And um so what I really had to do a deep dive into is learning about my son, not focusing so much on the autism, but what is it about him that can help him succeed? What can I do? And he really wanted to swim. You know,
Yeah.
even though that wasn't traditional, even though we weren't getting supports in that space, we were getting supports with his swim team, but in transition planning, that's not on the bingo card. That is not on the pipeline for someone that has autism because many have issues with gross motor skills, which is basically how they move. They have issues with balance. There's so many different things, but he did not have those challenges.
Mhm.
And and he wanted to go to college. Like I said, he's the middle child. Both he comes from a family that where education has been very important. So there are so many rites of passages that he wanted for himself that society said that someone with his comorbidities could not have. And so it was really challenging for me to try to keep him on track or move in that path that hasn't been laid for him. So, to answer your question about what I want people to know is first, you know your child or your loved one better than anyone else. And they all have something that they're good at. They all have something that they want. If you can figure out what that thing is, then that's where you start.
Mhm.
And when I think back to when Lawrence was younger, the signs were all there. I didn't know anything about autism. Honestly, when he got diagnosed, that was the first time I really looked into it. So, full of shame, I'm like, I went all this time knowing about disabilities and knew zero about autism until he turned 17. But
Mhm.
looking back, when he was 2, before 2, he loved cars. He loved swimming. He would line his cars up. He was so fixated, so fascinated. And I used to try to convince him to do something else, because that's what other kids do. They move from activity to activity. He seemed like really obsessed with swimming, but we got him to do soccer, got him to do, but swimming was his thing. Looking back, once I really started thinking about what's important to him, he really took off. He really took off. And um, so what I ask families to do, just take a minute, not really focusing on the things associated with autism that are draining for you, the things that those are the negatives. Just take a minute and look at your loved one and see what do they really seem interested in, and see how you can cultivate that, because within that they learn discipline, they learn
Mhm.
behavior management, they learn those skills because it's something they want to do and it's easy relatable. Like Lawrence struggled with executive functioning, time management, but when
Mm,
it comes to swimming, he sets his own alarm clock, on his phone. I mean, this was many years ago. He started training at 4:30 in the morning in the 6th grade, and he loved it so much where he learned how to use his phone to set it. He packs his own bag, he packs his own snacks for me. It's like, because he loved it, we were able to work on those social skills in that environment, which then transferred to some of the other environments like school, restaurants, travel,
mm,
those sort of things. So that's the one thing that I encourage families to do, is just to figure out what it is they love. They don't have to be good at it first, but they just have to at least love it long enough to be engaged more than 15 minutes.
mhm. And it's so interesting because you talked about comorbidity, which is really having multiple things, right? So if you can have
Correct.
anxiety and also depression, you can have,
Hmm.
as you just mentioned, executive functioning challenges, which
Hmm.
relatedly to ADHD, and you could have all these things and potentially even be, we were talking last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, about neurodivergence. And we just started talking about that in one of our conversations. And I think even that is an interesting topic. And I'd love you to talk about a little bit about that, because I know neurodivergence has a lot of those elements that you just talked about as examples, but we don't learn about that as parents or as loved ones with our children. And it could be that, and then there's a brilliance that comes with that, a person who is often
Hmm.
neurodivergent. They may have all of these challenges in one way, but there's a level of brilliance and wisdom that often comes, as we just learned. I just learned all about it via some work we're doing with Easter seals. So can you just talk a little bit about that and neurodivergence? And did that ever come up in any of the conversations around Lawrence? Because I know he's also, he's really good at a lot of good of things. He's got so many amazing positives. And it's not a
So
negative to
no,
be autistic.
it
No.
never came up.
Okay.
Never. So these are all new conventions, which I am absolutely happy about,
Hmm.
because the two things can exist together, which before someone asked, can you define what that means? So neurodivergence is someone who thinks differently than what's considered the norm. But the challenge is, what if the way we think isn't the right way to think? It's somebody who thinks differently. And what we actually encourage as a society is when we tell people to think outside of the box. But when people think outside of the box in other spaces, they're like, what are they thinking? The logic doesn't make sense. But a lot of people who are very intuitive, and the people who we consider geniuses, actually have been neurodivergent. So the one person that I just gave a talk to a school of fifth graders, a class of fifth graders last week, and having a conversation about people that do think differently and how that could be a good thing. I asked them if they knew anyone with autism, and they said no. And I asked people if they knew who Elon Musk was, and the kids all knew. They were like, Twitter, whatever the new name is, in the car. But he is neurodivergent. He was diagnosed with autism. He has Asperger's. And once you know those things, you can say, well, that makes sense, because he is brilliant as a businessman, whether people like him or not. If you look at how he got to where he was, his ability to think differently and outside of the box is what got him where he is. But if you listen to him speak, like if you really listen to how he speaks and how he engages, you can see that he doesn't communicate with people the best way that he actually could, but that doesn't take away from what he's able to do and what he has been. what he has been doing. But how this relates to this particular space, the mental wellness space, according to autism research, 7 out of 10 people diagnosed with autism have a mental health condition, such as
Mhm.
anxiety, depression,
Mhm.
attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is ADHD, or OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And again, comorbidities.
Or all of
And
it. Some
sometimes,
people or all,
yes,
right,
but
right.
yes, but what people should also understand is to not confuse the anxiety with the autism, to not confuse the depression with the autism, because a lot of people think of autism as this disorder that's violent, that's harmful, that's whatever. People come to any type of diagnosis with their life experiences, their traumas, everything. It comes with them. The diagnosis itself, autism isn't all of those things. It's just one of those things. So autism cannot be treated, but the mental wellness part of it absolutely can. There's so that's one thing that I do want people to know, that there are comorbidities, and to not allow even, a doctor try to lump everything into that one thing. Your child is all of those things, not one of those things, which is why I tell people that if you've met one person with autism, and it's a quote going around, you've only met one person with autism. So
That
to say, well, why is it that your son, your daughter can't do this, but I know 3 other people that can sit quietly, that have friends, that, to compare is unfair, simply because there are some people with autism that are on medication. There are some people who are not. There are
right,
some people who have families that have had therapies, like such as my son, like he's been in therapy not for autism, but when I mentioned like occupational therapy, the same thing with swimming. We had teachers that said, why does he need supports in the classroom? Why can't he sit in a classroom for an hour and 15 minutes without moving, but he can be on a plane to Australia for 14 hours? Those type of questions, as you know, I did not like, because it's different. He isn't able to focus. If someone has a language delay, a receptive language delay, you talking for an hour and 15 minutes will not keep him engaged, because mentally he's going
mhm,
to check out if they're not check-ins. Being able to sit on a plane for multiple hours with a TV in front of you and people bringing you food and drinks, there's no comparison, where he can get up, go to the bathroom whenever he wants to. So people in their minds decide what a person with autism is or is not able to do based on what they've seen other people with autism being able to do.
and it's often viewed as a negative versus a positive, and I've
Absolutely. And
mhm,
I saw it as a positive, because I was thankful that he was able to do it in this space, at least one other space. It's one thing for them to not be able to do it at all. But once you see that they do function in other spaces differently, you do realize also where the problems lie. So, to give you an example, he was struggling in high school being able to do those things. But when he went away to college, he did fine. And was he a completely different person? No. He did not turn into a different person from June of 2020 to August of 2020. Those changes just don't happen. What did change was the supports he had when he was in school. And he was in college, how far is Cincinnati from us? Like 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours away.
right,
And he was away from me, but the teachers provided in classroom supports, out of classroom supports. He was able to use technology, use his computers, so he didn't have to use his words as much.
mm,
And he was able to submit his work through there.
mm,
And with those supports, he went from not being able to get a 2.0 in high school to him making the dean's list the first 4 semesters that he was in school.
aw
And, so that again really, really pushed me more towards advocacy, of letting people know that this space that your loved one is in is just this space that your loved one is in,
that's
with
right,
love and support, and just the willingness of people to do one thing creates a path of success for him. Not to say that there won't be challenges, but it gives you hope to move on to the next thing.
Right. And one thing that you said that I think is so interesting, because I've been exploring this through our Easter sales work, but there, when you talked about Elon Musk and you talked about ADHD or, various comorbidities, so many people view them as negative. I just put a link in the chat from a reputable health organization that characterizes traits of neurodivergent people as challenging, or, and just saying that challenging, why is it challenging? It puts a negative tone automatically in the headline of
Hmm.
the link. Someone asks, what does that mean? And so you explain neurodivergence beautifully. I also just put more information, but the point I'm making is that when someone articulates traits of neurodiversity as challenging or negative, that feeds into the stereotype and the stigma around people with disabilities, which should not be there. And I think that's what you fight for every day is
Hmm.
for you advocate for people with disabilities. So to be
Hmm.
treated fairly, to have the same opportunities. And so some of these things, social communication difficulties, that could be simple as eye contact, and I'm thinking about my own children, speech and language challenges, stuttering, repetition, difficulty with focus, executive functioning, like most of us have those challenges. It's not necessarily a horrible thing. It's just
Hmm.
something we know we have to, it's like having an accommodation. We have to work on it and um, to work on it. And so I'm just sharing that I think it's interesting that a medical site has characterized neurodiverse and neurodiversity as challenging or potentially negative behaviors. And it's
And
just,
those words do hurt. What people don't understand is whenever you're creating a narrative, like you should be careful with the choice of words that you're using when you're talking about any group of people, because they're already over marginalized, and using those terms already puts people on alert. And whenever someone says that people with autism are challenging, challenging for who? Like, it's challenging for the person that's saying it, because you don't have the tools you need in order to work with that person. But it doesn't mean that they need, a degree to work with person. It means you lack the compassion or the empathy needed in order to address the situation at hand. It's not the autism that may be the issue. It may be the fact that you can't understand them.
mhm,
It's not the autism. Your inability to understand and be patient is what's causing the challenge, because they live with this. If someone with autism, they say that they may not look at you, which my son, like, he'll talk, he'll look up like this, but
mhm,
he's listening. Is
and,
the goal for them to look at you or to hear what you're saying?
and
If the
learn, right?
goal is for them to hear what you're saying, why do they need to comply? It's that compliance that people look for, and when they don't get that, it shuts it all out. But are they able to do what you've asked them to do? Can you communicate it differently? Because those learning styles have already been determined, not
Mhm,
specifically for people with autism, but some people are visual learners, some people are auditory, some people are written, some people just figuring out what their style is. But my son he won't even be looking at you. But he'll say something like, I mentioned to you, we're driving to practice at 4 o'clock in the morning, pitch black. He's got his headphones on and he's doing something with his phone. And he'll be like, Mom, look out. There's a deer on the right side of the road that I didn't even see. Well, he's not in the road, he's in the woods, but you can see like his eyes. But it doesn't look like my son even noticed that, because he's got his headphones on. So his situational awareness is fabulous. Like, it is much better than anything that I could do, because I can be very hyper focused. Like, I'm just trying to stay awake and get to practice. He's doing three things at a time. And I
mhm,
could be talking to him and he'll respond, but never look at me once. And
mhm.
so when people say that something is challenging, it's just that they've not found a way to meet, am I going to say meet that need? But I can't think of anything else right now, but
Or to
meet that
view the
particular.
positive and also view it as a positive. It's like this, I'm not going to go into the site, but I am going to send them a note. And someone just said they clearly don't have enough people on their staff. that understand this topic. And so that's a really great point.
But
Um,
this is why people don't also disclose that they have autism, because I have seen and you, Kelly, as well, and working in corporate America in many spaces, we give people grace all the time for what we may consider bad behavior. You know, I've worked in offices where the head top was had a huge attitude problem. Like, he wasn't diagnosed with autism or anything. He was just mean, and people, you hear people yelling and cursing like when work gets stressed, but people just kind of dismiss it. They're like, oh yeah, such and such has this big account and they're stressed. Or we have coworkers that aren't the nicest people, but for some reason we're able to give them grace. We're able to just blow it off. We're able to go back and do the thing. Even young children, like, bullying happens in school systems all the time, but the people with autism aren't the ones doing the bullying. So when we look at how we interact with other people, we give other people grace that don't even ask for it. So when it comes to people with autism, why is it so hard to accept that this is their situation all the time, not just
absolutely.
today? And but to the person's point, the more that, and this is also what I wanted to talk about with what I want people to know about autism. If you have a loved one or a child with autism, take them out. Like, there's no shame in having a loved one with autism or disability. When my son was younger, he went everywhere that we went. We still take him everywhere. We travel with him. He's gone to restaurants from the beginning. Take them out, because the only way that people will know how to interact and become more aware of what's atypical for a person with autism is if we take our people out. I have families whose adult kids still have meltdowns in the store, and they're like, I don't take them because it's embarrassing. People need to see the meltdowns. They're not temper tantrums. It's a sensory issue. This is how we get change done, because some stores have music blaring. It's not too much to ask a store to make their environments more sensory friendly. They're not just falling out because they want to fall out. There are other things, but I really encourage you to take them out, to
Right.
allow them to explore, allow them to just be. And that's how we get to this point of acceptance and understanding.
I love that. I want to make sure that we see this person in the chat, and feel free to come off of mute if you want to share
Oh, please.
with
Yes.
us. But they say my son is on the spectrum. He was diagnosed at age 9. I was diagnosed after he was diagnosed. I excel in some spaces and struggle in others. That's such a great point. And then someone is asking, what does adult testing or assessment for autism look like? And the respondent says, for adults, it's basically questioning to see if you meet the DSM criteria. That was my experience. So
No, that's all absolutely correct. And many adults are now being diagnosed with
I'm sure I'm
autism.
on the spectrum. I looked at the definition of neurodivergent and I said, okay, that's a lot of me on there. And it's interesting. I've never been diagnosed. I mean, with certain things, anxiety, depression, but not all of these other pieces that are, I think, as you talk, as comorbidities. They're all, so much of
Mhm.
are interrelated. So I think that's really interesting. And again, if you want to come off of mute or share, feel free. If you're on your phone, it's a *6 on the phone, and you can come off of mute at any time if you choose. If you choose.
So,
But I
Kelly,
think
I'll take a pause if there's someone that wants to share their experience or talk about their loved one, or share what you want people to know about autism, because as Kelly mentioned, it's always negative. The things that we hear are always negative, but even in my own organization, I encourage people to talk about the positive. Let people know what's amazing or special about your loved one. So definitely, if there's someone in this space that wants to share, I'd love to hear it. I love the happy stories.
I'm looking to see if anybody's coming off of mute. Um, while we wait for that, because I would love to hear that as well and have people share if you are up to it or would like to. Would love to have you, Dee, explain what you did with the Maryland Department of Transportation, that what you did recently.
Mhm.
We have Lawrence and people with disabilities.
Okay, no problem. So we, again, my
I
son
do see someone
always.
who's come off. If you want to hold 1 second, I do see somebody who's come off of
Oh,
mute.
okay, okay.
Good morning.
Oh, hi, everyone. Good morning. I wanted to share, I had a similar experience. I'm an educator, so I noticed some things with my son when he was younger, but by third grade, HD and executive functioning. Went through school, I pulled him out of school, homeschooled him for a number of years because of the challenges, because he was doing great academically. So they didn't want to support him in other areas. So ultimately, I got a lot of resources, tools, and he wanted to go back to school. So we kind of transitioned him. He went to public school, private school first, then public school. But then when COVID happened, we had a challenge because we had him having him at home. We noticed, he was having more meltdowns, struggling to keep up, had him evaluated, and they diagnosed him with autism. So, like you, 17 years old, about to go off to college, and resources are ending. So, we ultimately worked with his college. His first, he had gotten, great scholarships. So, um, thought, academically, was always, he tanked his first year. Um, and didn't let us know. And of course, the university is not letting us know because he's an adult what was going on. Um, I only found out really because the mom of his roommate, because his roommate was like, something's going on with him. And she reached out that we needed to get him support because he was tanking. Ultimately, got the supports in place, work with the school. He had to advocate for himself, got the supports in place and changed majors and is doing phenomenal. Not only doing phenomenal, he has launched his own business. He's done, so I'm so super proud of him. He's done probably in the last 4 months, 3 pitches he went to South by Southwest. He's done pitches here in the DC area. He's got a potential contract with the Navy for his business idea. He's a gamer and he's developing a platform for gamers. And gaming is actually, he says, what saved him during COVID.
Wow.
And so he's now creating a platform because he's saying there's so many others that are like me. We don't have a safe space. And so I am beyond proud of him. But
Wow.
I call it his superpower. I
Mm,
said even when he was younger, he sees the world in 3 dimensions.
amazing.
He So mathematically he can see. I mean, at 8th grade, he was taking a college course because of a mentor with him was like, I want him in my class to learn this, and it was building prototypes in 3D software.
Mm,
And he saw it. He could see it and build it in his head.
mm,
And so he's now taking that into the gaming space. And he wants to have more Black and brown faces to receive that support. So that's what he's doing. And I'm beyond proud of him. He's doing great academically now that he's kind of found his niche and gotten the support. So it is possible.
wow.
My only concern now is the social skill. you know, he's still not able to build those relationships and friendships because he's a out of sight, out of mind kind of person. If he's not engaged with you constantly, he really doesn't even remember you.
Um,
And so,
that's
he has friends from high school. Well, the few he had, he doesn't have contact except for one. And and now he's a business partner. So they keep in contact.
We lost you after you said they keep
He's, like I said,
contact. We lost the words that you said after you said he was a business partner and they keep in contact, but then we lost what you said after that.
but outside of that, he doesn't know how to sustain relationships.
Got it.
So, so we're working on that piece for him. He's at college and he's probably, you hear, about his college experience and he's like, well, I don't go out. He's not a partier. He doesn't, do any drugs or drinking or any of those things. So he's like, well, that's what people do here. So,
Mm,
and I'm
yeah.
going, but there are more people like you who don't do that, but he doesn't know where to find them. So, um, we have, mom groups that are trying to get the young people together, but he's still kind of not found his niche in that area. But outside of that, like I said, phenomenal, doing, phenomenally well with his business. And we're excited and very proud of him for that. So I'm finding, and I say to people when I meet others that are similar, I'm going, okay, so what's their superpower? Because as you described, when they find that niche, and they are hyper focused on it and can, do phenomenal things. If it's, I call it their gift. What is their gift that they contribute to the world? And
Mhm,
so once we focus on the gift that they're giving, we really are able to see where it could be art, it could be music,
mhm.
um, it could be any number of things. How do we capitalize on that?
I love your story. Thank you for sharing
I
that.
know that makes me so happy. And the one thing that she said, which mirrored what I said before, find their niche. Once you find the thing that they're really interested in, they can absolutely flourish because as she mentioned, whereas initially with the diagnosis, someone says they're hyper focused on this thing, and that's not good. We need to find a way for them to do other things. But their ability to really focus on one thing is actually a strength. That is actually something that is highly, highly beneficial. And I think that's what helped Lawrence with swimming. Like we call it, being obsessed with swimming, but maybe he's just really focused on succeeding. And as she mentioned with her son, he was really focused on this one thing, and it sounds like he is very successful. And um the ability to really, and I don't want to say focus, but be committed instead of being hyper focused. What if they're just really committed to something? Because for people who lack commitment, why is that not a problem? Why is them doing that? And so thank you for sharing that. That was wonderful.
Mhm. That's wonderful. There's a question, Dee. Any tips on how folks on the spectrum can sustain and build relationships?
We are still in that space right now, of trying to do that with my son, and that actually is the disability. The one thing that I see helps a little, not as quick as we would like, is to have them be more socialized. What I mentioned before of getting them out, it's almost like a trial by fire because some skills with them can only be taught, learned, honed in on if they're out in the field. So, we with the program, my son's in a CTP program for students with autism and intellectual disabilities in college, and that's something that they work with him on every single day. That is his curriculum. But you can't stand in front of a classroom and role play all the time of if somebody says this, then you do this. They need to be out in the world and interacting with people because being able to read the social cues of, well, you see what happens when you say this to a person, they need to see people's reaction to them. They need to be able to, because people with autism are very intuitive. They can feel the energy. They can tell when something's not right. They may not be able to articulate or know what that thing is, but the only way to do it is to get them out there. It has to be the experience needs to be repetitive,
Mhm.
and then seeing that the experiences can be different, and even in that space providing accommodation. So one of the things I mentioned were travel. Many people tell me that they do not travel with their loved one with autism because of sensory, just for so many reasons. But just airline travel, the airport, all airports are supposed to have the airlines where you can disclose on the ticket that they have autism. Autism gets you early boarding. A lot of people don't know that. When you go to the gate and you let people with disabilities board early, you can get on the plane early. TSA has a program called TSA Cares. When you register with them, they don't have to wait in the long security lines. They'll get taken directly to the front. There's the sunflower um, project, and I have a couple of lanyards. Well, I have a ton of lanyards here. But if you walk through the airport with anyone with a hidden disability, an invisible disability, and they would know to be extra compassionate or to ask you if you need anything. So just some examples of when you do take them out, you are entitled to some type of accommodation. You would just need to ask. So to answer the question, get them out and try to find the supports and get them out and try to find the accommodations in those spaces so that they can get that real world feedback.
Dee, your audio was a little bit garbled. Can you share more or share again the sunflower? Did you hold up a lanyard that had the sunflower
Yeah.
project? And what
Hmm.
exactly
Yeah.
does that do, and how does a person get that? Okay, so it's a
So
lanyard that has sunflowers on it if somebody's just
yes.
okay.
Yes, it's a lanyard that has sunflowers on it. And you will see people in the airport when you're traveling. Even some of the workers may have a lanyard. It doesn't have to be this one, but my organization, Accessibility Bridge Corporation, we actually signed on as a partner for this sunflower initiative. It's called Hidden Disabilities. And sometimes in your airport, like by the luggage section, you'll see an LED board that has the Sunflower Initiative on it. There should be a space in your airport where you can go and report, and you can get these. You can get a lanyard or just wear something with a sunflower, but that is supposed to be a universal symbol that either you or someone that you're traveling with has a hidden disability. And it doesn't have to be autism. It could be ADHD, it could be arthritis, it could be anything. But anything with the sunflower, so it doesn't have to be just that.
So the website to get that is hdsunflower.com. So hidden
Mhm.
disabilities and then sunflower. Hidden disability.
Correct.
And so it's basically non-visible or invisible disabilities would be considered like an autism or an ADHD or other invisible.
Anything,
Hmm.
anything, as I mentioned, like arthritis or multiple sclerosis, anything that people can't see, where people need to know that you need extra support or extra kindness or extra whatever. It's a universal symbol. And as you know, Kelly, I've been working with the people at Washington Reagan Airport about that because we had a horrible experience going through um, even he has TSA pre-check and he has gosh, I can't think of the other one that we paid
Clear,
for.
maybe clear.
Clear. It was
Mhm.
that's where we had the problem. That's where we had the big problem going through Clear. And I can talk about that another time. But at that time, we had like I was wearing a sunflower skirt. I had they had all these things, but there wasn't a lot of training. But you don't have to buy anything. The airport should have these for free. But if you want to have it going in, anything with the sunflower will work. Like my office here has sunflowers everywhere. Like anything with the sunflowers should be enough to let them know.
Interesting. Super helpful. I didn't know asthma was considered a disability. I'm looking at this website. According
Mhm.
to the website, that's considered a disability, asthma as well. Um, so thank you for the person that shared and all the great comments in the chat. Is there anyone else that would like to share? I see a comment that says, I've been trying to get my 15-year-old to speak up. It's not been successful. He has many, many tools that he uses. Is a person trying to speak? I'm trying to see. I'll just read what the message says. He was diagnosed at 1 and excels with friends, math, and music, and has taken.
I can jump in. It's
Oh,
Tracy.
wonderful. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, my son Kingston is here. And I said, can you just say something about everything you use? And, we were sitting outside the other day. He was diagnosed at 1.5 and was not making eye contact. He was lining up cars, just the typical things you think of autism. And I mean, today he's 15 and we were sitting outside on the deck the other day and he said, I've really learned to enjoy nature when it comes to anxiety. I listen to the birds and relax. And he was saying all these tools. I said, did you learn that in therapy? He said, well, I learned that in therapy, but I also just, it naturally came to me. And there are tools that I use when I want to calm myself. There are tools when I want to make friends. And I said, you should be, kind of a coach for teenagers who are on the spectrum and, tell them some of the things you did. But he won't say anything on this call. So I was trying to get him to talk about it. But so many things that you mentioned, Dee, that about learning your child are so important. He even told me 2 years ago, I started playing guitar and that saved my life. I found that focus on guitar, and he's good at it. He plays hours and hours and hours a day, and he's really good at math. He's in like college math, and he's in 9th grade, and those things, letting them really explore those things that they love, I think are so important. And then I would say for parents who just have kids who are just diagnosed, it's not the end of the world, because I think some parents get that diagnosis. Our daughter was just diagnosed with ADHD last week and she wanted to be tested. And she was happy for the diagnosis. She said, okay, now I can put things in place to help me get through life. So I would just say it's not the end of the world. There is help, that you do have to be on the schools to get the resources you need, and really working on those IEPs and 504s to get everything and really being involved. But I think the world is endless, and I love the way my kids think. I love that they think outside the box. They come up with, we have the most interesting conversations. So that's all. But this is a really great, and thank you, Dee, and Kelly for this.
It's amazing.
Thank you, Tracy. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Wonderful tools and tips. So thank you for sharing, and for Kingston for sharing. That's amazing.
And I love that she brought up the calming strategies, because something that we didn't have time to talk about is them being self-advocates for themselves. I know my son doesn't necessarily advocate for people with autism. Like, he's not so verbal that he's in the advocacy space, but he definitely, we've taught him how to self-advocate for the things that he needs in that moment, and to use the tools that he needs whenever he needs it. So it's funny that Tracy mentioned the outside. That's one of the strategies that his therapist gave him, because he is able to calm down, and when he's able to leave a situation, going outside, getting some fresh air, taking a walk, those are his calming strategies, just as Tracy mentioned. But what we try to work with, his school, sports, the other thing is for them to understand that when he does get up to walk outside, he's using a strategy that should not be looked at as defiance, you know, or something negative. That's a positive. He's learning how to self-regulate in a space that's overwhelming for the moment. And so my part of the advocacy is helping others respect his choices, and when he is making good choices for himself, that are non-disruptive. So for him to get out of the pool, go outside and get fresh air without waiting to be acknowledged or waiting, so we're working on those things. But those are positives. Those are self-regulation tools that he has to help deal with the anxiety that he has. I think I saw a question pop up, Kelly.
Any resources available for paying for adult autism testing when not covered by insurance?
I would try to find a provider that does cover it. We because it is expensive, and there are many therapists that do testing virtually that will cover it. And I would ask for not necessarily just autism testing, like an educational assessment, depending on how old the child is. But I have found that however the provider puts the information into the system determines whether, number one, the insurance is covered. And just like with a chiropractor or certain OT, some people just don't take insurance. And I would just recommend finding a provider that does accept insurance for the testing, honestly, because we wouldn't be able to, afford $5,000 a pop every single time that we got him tested. We've not had to pay out of pocket at all.
That's fantastic. And another person is suggesting perhaps your state offers vocational rehabilitation in the Department of Economic Resources, and that may cover biopsychosocial assessments. Biopsychosocial assessments. Department of Economic.
That's true.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, if they do qualify for VR funds or doors. Like my son doesn't qualify for any government resources, so we've not been able to make use of many of those things. But I tell families, turn over every stone, because you don't know what your child qualifies for. Like our state has an autism waiver. He could have benefited from that had we known about it.
What is
But
that? It's an autism waiver.
and in the state of Maryland, it's a waiver that you get where you get access to free services or money to cover autism related expenses. And that wait list now, I think, is like 5 years. They're cleaning it up now. But had he been diagnosed earlier, we could have he could have received those services without receiving Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, those things. But with a diagnosis, your loved one can qualify for a plethora of resources, and VR, as this person mentioned, is one of them.
That's awesome. So last comments, Dee, we're at 10 o'clock and Dr. Vicky's going to come on and close us out with the prayer in a moment. But do you have any last things you want to share with our group today about autism?
Just accept them as they are. Be more compassionate and inclusive when I'm not going to say when you can, just be compassionate and inclusive of people with autism, and definitely try to spread awareness when you can. I mean, that's just the basics of it. Nothing special, just show compassion.
Acceptance, compassion, love, and then advocacy, right? That's all. That's what you do. Your whole living, your life is focused on advocating. I love that. So thank you. Thank you for sharing today and for all that you do.
Yeah, always. Thank you.
And for SonRise, we appreciate you. And I will turn it over to Dr. Vicki Johnson, who will close us out in a prayer this morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Dee. That was awesome. And good morning, Kelly, and to everyone. Let's pray. God, we thank you for this day that you have given to us. It's a beautiful day, and we choose to rejoice and give you glory. Thank you for this safe space for parents and other caregivers and providers who show love in the world to those who may seem difficult or challenging to love. Thank you for the grace that you have given to Dee and to every parent of a child with autism. We thank you for your grace is sufficient. Thank you for awareness, for this focus, for advocacy, and for the opportunities, God, to expand life and life experiences for those living with disabilities, both visible and invisible. We thank you for the SonRise Project, for our visionary. And God, give us strength, give us vision, give us tenacity, determination, and commitment as we continue to grow, build, and expand a safe space so that we can continue to honor you by living purpose-driven lives and giving you the glory for it. Now bless us as we go into this day. Keep us safe, keep our family members safe. And I just celebrate every accomplishment shared on this call, every opportunity, every step of progression. Thank you for the example, because the examples give the rest of us hope. And you said in your word, hope deferred makes the heart sick. So we thank you for hope today. And we give your name glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Have a powerful day, everyone.
That's beautiful, Vicky, Dr. Vicky. Thank you so much for that. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful words. Thank you. Have an incredible day. Well, it looks like somebody's hand is up. Would you like to share? I see a hand up. Feel free. If you're on your phone, you hit *6 to come off. Let's see if I can unmute you. I see a hand up. I want to make sure if you are trying to speak, please, we don't want to cut you off. Well, maybe that's a amen hand for the church. Let the church say amen. I'm not sure. I don't. I just want to make sure that you have an opportunity to share if that was what you are looking to do. So again, if you want to share, the person on that has the hand up, you hit *6 if you're on your phone. Well, if not, oh, I do see you there. Yes, please. Go ahead.
I can't do *6. I don't know where that is.
Oh, I hear you. We hear you.
Okay.
Hello.
Kelly, this is one of your mom's friends, Beverly Porter. I wanted to make sure that I listened to this because one of my friends in Ohio has a son who has autism, and I wanted to make sure that I listened to it so that I could pass it on to her. And I appreciate your program today. Thank you.
Wonderful. It's so good to hear your voice. Gosh, wonderful to hear you, Mrs. Porter. Thank you for being here. And the recordings are typically out the week after our call, so I can also follow up and send it to you for your friend.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
You have a good day. Thank you so much.
You too.
God bless you.
God bless as well. So with that, thank you everybody for being here. Dr. Vicky, thank you for your incredible prayer. Here's to a beautiful week, and we will be back next Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern with Dr. Linda McGee, who will have an open session, completely open for people to come and share and be in this space that's filled with compassion and love and acceptance. So thank you. Have a wonderful day. Dee, thank you again for being here and being such an incredible advocate and leader in this space, and for sharing. So everyone have a beautiful day, and we'll see you next Sunday.